What's going on, guys? This is Ryan with the RK Outpost, and over the last several years, it has become increasingly obvious that Hollywood and the people who run Hollywood have decided to put storytelling second and instead focus on pushing their ideology and their narrative, and it is absolutely destroying the entertainment industry. So many people have been speaking up about this, but now Quentin Tarantino, someone who's in Hollywood himself, is now saying the exact same thing. Take a look at this article from Bounding Into Comics. Quentin Tarantino calls out the rampant ideological climate of modern Hollywood. Director Quentin Tarantino, known for Kill Bill, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction, recently appeared on Real Time with Bill Maher, where he called out the rampant ideological climate of modern Hollywood. Now, when it comes to Quentin Tarantino, I can't say I'm like a Quentin Tarantino fanboy. I would say I like most of his movies. Some of them I just have absolutely no care for, no interest in. So I'm not the biggest Quentin Tarantino fan. I do respect the fact that he does his own thing, he has his own style, and he stays very, very committed to that. And that's one of the things that he talked about on Bill Maher. He also went on Rogan, I think he went on Rogan yesterday and talked about this as well. So we're going to hear some of the things that he said about Hollywood, about the idea that so many people in Hollywood are just so focused on their ideology. Now, a couple of these clips got put on this channel here, Toasty Teresa, so thank you for clipping a couple of these things out. I wanted you guys to hear this.
One thing before we run out of time, I have to say to you, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And
that is very, very true. Somebody ambushed him and was like, why doesn't Margot Robbie have enough lines? Is because you don't want women speaking? And Quentin Tarantino just shut them the fuck down. He just said, like, I reject your hypothesis, and moved on. You know what I mean? Just had none of it.
You do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
If somebody brings up something that actually is legitimate, I'll even have a conversation with them about it because I'm actually into interesting thought, and I don't have to even agree with you. Oh, but that's an interesting point.
Right.
That's an interesting point. But, there has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good.
That is what all of us have been saying, and that is what so many of us have been saying. The problem is with Hollywood right now is they're not focused on the art. They're not focused on creating a good story. They're focused on pushing their ideology and force-feeding it to you, beating you over the head, shoving it into things that it has no place in. All because that's what they believe, so that's what they want you to believe and think that everyone should believe. Instead of focusing on entertaining people, telling a good story, creating a great character. Instead, it is about ideology. This is fucking spot on.
Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies. Are you bullish on the future of movies? Because
well, look, you have to always look at it.
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happens. This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves. All right, so it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s. All right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is. And then, to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood is the 50s. And the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2.
Right.
But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood comes out. Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's
all right?
going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first. This is basically 80s part 2, what we're living through right now.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new...
So what Quentin Tarantino is saying is these things do go in waves, and he is still hopeful that eventually we'll get out of this. There'll be kind of a reaction to this. There will be a reaction to this, especially this like 2016 to 2021 that we have right now, where people have just freaked out. We all know why. There was a big election, and a lot of people in Hollywood, the elites, were shocked by it, and they decided we're never going to let that happen again. So they decided to push everything into entertainment. Now, Quentin Tarantino is saying that just like when the 80s, everything became very, very politically correct, he feels like things are going to turn around, that things are going to be different, and we're going to get out of this. I certainly hope that that's the case. I don't know if that'll happen. I know Quentin Tarantino is someone who's he has fought against like this cancel culture mob for a very long time. This is back from 2019, end of the affair. Why it's time to cancel Quentin Tarantino. This is before we were talking about someone getting canceled every day. This is 2019, where people are actively advocating to cancel Quentin Tarantino because there's violence against women in his movies. Violence against men, completely fine. No one has a problem with it. Someone tries to bring a little equality to the picture, has violence against women depicted, and no, that's a no-no. You need to cancel this man. It is absolutely insane. He did go on Joe Rogan as well and talked about some of those differences, right? He talked about how he helped the film industry overcome cancel culture and political correctness in the 90s. Quote, I never let them stop me. And one of the things he was talking about, I want to just let you listen to this first little bit where he says how they kind of developed movies in the 70s versus the 80s, and how the fall of like the anti-hero, where you didn't have to have this perfect dude, this likable main character all the time, like you ended up having in the 80s so often.
Time for movies ever, because it was just this kind of politically correct time. Now in the 50s it was different, because that was society, was that. In the 80s it was self-censorship was going on.
What started that?
Well, it was just the rise of political correctness after the 70s, where everything was just go as far as you can. Then all of a sudden, everything got watered down. In the 70s, you had movies where it's like characters weren't necessarily the hero. They were fucked up, but they were interesting characters, and you sit down and you follow them, whether it be Travis Bickle or Charlie Rain in Rolling Thunder, or Joe, Peter Boyle's character in Joe. They weren't the heroes, but you could even have heroes, and they could die meaninglessly at the end. That was actually considered a commercial ending back in the 70s, because it just shows how you can't win. Everything's fucked. You just can't win in America. It's just the way it is. You go and you fight in Vietnam, you survive Vietnam, and you get shot in a liquor store during a holdup. Everything was cynical. Then, all of a sudden, in the 80s, all that was washed away. And the most important thing about a character was that they were likable. And that was every character had to be likable, and the audience had to like everybody. And even a movie that pushed the envelope and tried to do...
That kind of I was just thinking about this right now when he said that. That kind of reminds me of the MCU and how every single character does kind of when we got to Phase 3, all the wisecracking, all the jokes, all the back and forth. They did kind of feel like every character was like that.
Do chancy things. Well, it could do it for about an hour. Then the last 20 minutes would be them literally going back on everything they did. The first hour, apologizing it and making everything fine. And just I'll give you a good.
And so what Quentin Tarantino went to explain was that when, he came into the film industry, they just started doing things that were not normal, and things changed. Movies changed. Entertainment changed. Now we've had this fallback in this era, and people are pushing back against it. Quentin Tarantino believes that it will change. I'm hopeful that it will, because Hollywood is absolute garbage right now. Entertainment is trash because it is fully driven by ideology instead of the entertainment value, instead of telling a good story. So hopefully Quentin Tarantino is onto something, one, by calling it out, because it is important that he does this. It's important that people, prominent in the space on places like Bill Maher, right? A guy who a lot of people may have disliked for a very long time, but he's been making a little bit more sense lately, especially with his take on cancel culture. So not only talking on Maher, talking on Rogan, and getting these things out there to make people understand that they're not crazy. It's not just them that's seeing this ideological bullshit. It is everyone, because it is real, it is there, and it is destroying their craft. Will it return? Will it get better? Hopefully. Hopefully that pendulum will swing back around and we'll get quality entertainment from Hollywood again. But until then, I'm not going to let anything slide. I'm going to continue to call this shit out when I see it. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching, everyone. And a huge shout out to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram? Check out the description below. You'll find links to my P.O. box and my Patreon as well. I'll talk to you guys later.